I think you may have guessed what the talk will be about today, this morning. So far I talked about hindrances, and yesterday about nimittas. And what comes after nimittas? The jhanas. When somebody told me they enjoyed my talk last night, I replied to them that because I'm talking about what I enjoy, what inspires me, what just gives me big boosts of energy. So I'll begin, like many people do when they start a talk, is to give like a quote from the suttas. And that quote is, Nati janang apanyasa panya nati ajayato yam hi janang cha panyacha sawe nibbana santike. That's verse 372 of the Dhammapada. It's one of my favourite ones. What it says is Nati janang apanyasa. There is no jhana for one who hasn't got wisdom. There's no wisdom for one who doesn't do jhanas. But in the one who has jhana and panya, sawe nibbana santike, they're in the presence of nibbana. That's how powerful these jhanas are. And not only that, I think you all remember the story of our Buddha. For so many years, doing many, many different types of practice. Many of them were ascetic practices. And no matter just how ascetic he was, none of those seemed to have supplied any deep insight worthy of enlightenment. And so that was when, this is from the Mahasachaka Sutta, 36 of the Majjhima Nikaya. That was when our Lord Buddha, to be, the Bodhisattva, remembered that time when he was a young boy, sitting under the rose apple tree while his father was doing a ploughing ceremony. He was only a young boy, but nevertheless, sitting under the rose apple tree, he managed to enter this very deep state. I often wonder how he could do that, but there is an explanation why. But anyway, it happened. I'm not sure if he did anapanasati to enter that state, or what he did to enter that state. But then, in all those years he was searching to a path to enlightenment, he neglected that state. Why? It was because it was too joyful. You think, how can you go towards this magnificent state of renunciation called nibbana with a path which was so blissful? But then, having tried everything else, a deep insight arose in the Bodhisattva. Why am I afraid of that pleasure? I'm talking about the experience of that first jhana, which has nothing to do with the five senses. And then he resolved, I will not be afraid of that pleasure. Perhaps that's a way to full enlightenment. And the insight arose, that is the way to full enlightenment. And the next thing he considered, that how can anybody with such a weak, emaciated body, which had done so many years of ascetic practice, how can anyone in this type of state get into those deep types of meditation? See, it's hard. It's not impossible, but it's hard. And so he resolved to start eating properly, washing properly, resting. And then when his body was fit and healthy, then he went to the the Uruwela. He went to the what's now called Bodh a beautiful park next to the river, the sort of place which you'd think would be a resort. It was, like many of those monasteries, aramas, owned by wealthy people with good air, beautiful sense of tranquility, enough water, not that ascetic. And there, the first thing he did was have a meal. That was a meal which was prepared for a heavenly being by Sujata. He ate that meal and he sat down and meditated. And he realized this was the path to enlightenment. And that's where our Buddha came from. Now there's many important parts of that story, but I'll just pass over them quickly. It was a comfort, not too indulging, but not too ascetic. And that was the reason why the Buddha's very first teaching, when he went to Savatthi, to the Jetavana, to teach his first 5 disciples. His first 5 disciples had abandoned him because they thought, if you cannot get enlightened by doing all this ascetic practice, how on earth can you get enlightened by eating properly, bathing, resting? They thought he'd given up the path. But then when they saw him, his whole demeanor, the way he looked, the way he walked, the way he spoke, arose faith in those 5 disciples. They took his bowl, they washed his feet, and then he talked to them. And the first thing he taught to them was the middle way, to avoid the extremes of asceticism or indulgence in the 5 senses. The way of asceticism, as many of you will know, Atta Kilamata Yoga. It literally means practices which tire and exhaust the body. That you see sometimes monks or nuns doing too many dhutangas, too many ascetic practices, which makes them weak. Some ascetic practices are helpful, but please make sure that you're mindful enough of your health of your body. You're not indulging, but you're keeping a strong, fit, healthy body, so you can meditate with very, very little bodily problems, as best you are able. But the most important thing was the Buddha emphasized at that point that jhana was an important way to full enlightenment, which is why in the Eightfold Path, this is again from the Dhammapada, Ezo wamago nati anyo dasanasa visuddhya, that's verse 274. There is no other path. This is the only path to the purification of wisdom. And that is referring to the passages below. What is that path? Always the Eightfold Path. No shortcuts. And that was very important to state that, because even though I often emphasize the importance of jhana, you have to have the other 7 factors strong as well for even jhana to work. So even though I'm focusing on jhana in this talk, it should not be at the expense of all the other factors of the Eightfold Path. There are things like, the samadhi, the right view. That view is, of course, paramount. Why are you meditating? Why are you monks and nuns? What are you doing this for? Is it to be famous? Is it to get lots of respect? Is it in order to get lots of money for your monastery? Is it there to get some sort of powers where you can have control of others? Of course not. This is the only way why we meditate, is actually to get through to the truth of why we suffer, why we get reborn, and how we can never need to get reborn ever again. How we can cut that cycle of rebirth. And if you have the right view, that will also come with the right view of something like the Four Noble Truths, as best you've understood them. That this is understanding what suffering is and how to overcome and let go of that suffering, seeing its cause is craving. The reason why I emphasize that, something most of you already know, is because we know that this is what the Dhamma is, but still we ignore that when we meditate. When we're meditating, we're craving something. This is one of the reasons why that I notice a disconnect, a separation between what the Dhamma is and what we know is the Dhamma and what meditation is and how we practice. The two have to go together. An example of that, because I teach in many different lands and countries, and because I am social enough to talk to many of you and many of the other people I meet, I remember many years ago going to Hong Kong to give some teachings, staying in a temple there which welcomed monks from all over. And there I was just having tea with a Mahayana monk from mainland China. And while we were talking, he told me this anecdote, that they were holding a Zen retreat in this monastery somewhere in mainland China. And during the Zen retreat, the teacher, this senior monk, who was a Zen master, was walking down the line of meditators, mostly lay people, with the Zen stick. You may have seen this on photographs and videos. And what happens is, if any of those meditators have sloth and torpor, they start to rock or nod. They get hit on the back with a Zen stick. So there was one middle-aged meditator who was sleepy. So out of supposed compassion, the Zen master hit her over the back with a Zen stick. It was only a few years ago. So her reaction to that was to get out her mobile phone and call the police. And the police came to the monastery where the retreat was being held and arrested that monk and took him away. You cannot do that in mainland China. That's illegal. And the poor monk had no recourse. But then what are monks doing, using such force, such violence on their students? To me that never made sense. Though we have gentleness, inspiration, not hitting people over the back with a Zen stick. So, those ascetic practices have got no part, the Buddha said, in the path to enlightenment. Restraint, yes. Simplicity, just having enough sleep but not too much. Enough of a comfortable mattress but not too much. Enough food but not too much. If one can find that middle path, then you are starting on the path. And that second factor of we're doing everything out of renunciation, nekama, kindness, avyapada, and gentleness. And those three things were just also important When you meditate, why are you meditating? Are you trying to attain something? If you are trying to attain to being a soul one, or to get jhana, you're going against the second factor of the Eightfold Path. It's not going to work. If you're being cruel to yourself, pushing yourself through pain, I cannot see how that's going to work. You don't try and conquer pain. You understand it. You learn from it. And in that understanding and learning, that's where it's overcome. And all the precepts you have as nuns and monks, my goodness, when you live over in a place like Australia, people ask you, why do you have to keep so many rules? I've been a monk, this is my 49th wasa this year. 49 years is a long time to keep these rules. Ajahn Brahm, don't you regard these as a great burden and inconvenience? And basically I said no, and I'm honest. These are just natural. They make sense to me so many years ago. They made sense to me now. It's just a beautiful way of a peaceful life. Not harming others, not harming myself. No, not accepting money, not accepting valuable things. And when you live simply like that, you can, just put your bag down somewhere. No one wants to steal it because there's nothing to steal. There's nothing valuable in there. When you live simply, you live a very worry-free life. Even where I live, the cave in which I live, it's not locked. I don't know who goes in there, who goes out, but there's nothing to steal in there, so you can go in whenever you want. That sense of lightness, that sense of freedom is really important. So you have less worries and things to weigh your mind down when you're meditating. And then also I mentioned just the restraint which comes from the samavayama, the saying no to things, no to getting your mind inflamed by lust or by wanting, no to remembering things from the past which cause you negativity, anger or ill will. Look, I cannot understand why people get angry. Anger is like you don't like someone, so you pick up a red-hot coal and try and throw it at them. Most times you will miss, but every time you burn your own hand. It's actually a foolish thing to do. It's like a bad reaction which we've been conditioned into, but once we start to examine that, we realize it's a stupid way of reacting. You get hurt more than the object of your anger. And which is why that we then get a peaceful mind. And that peaceful mind, where we're not looking to reject the happiness of the mind, the sense of freedom, we can accept that and embrace it. That's part of what happens. The more we let go of suffering, the more we let go of dukkha, of course, the more energized and happy your mind becomes. I have mentioned this a couple of times, but I never really told you the source. And it's the Dhamma Sutta. King Pasenadi went to see the Buddha, apparently for the last time, before he passed away. And this is the king passing away. And he came in to see the Buddha and started kissing the Buddha's feet. And this was a king doing that. And the Buddha said, "What are you doing this for, king? You're a great king. Why are you just kissing the feet of this old monk? Now, any of you respect me, please don't do that." But actually, I know why people do that. The first teacher who taught me about jhanas, I often think if I saw him, I'll maybe not be able to resist. Just get down. It's just a sense of gratitude, a sense of thank you for giving me this incredible gift. So anyway, even there was, when I was in Thailand, there was a monk. He was quite a well-known monk. He was Ajahn Buddhadasa's assistant teacher. He's an American. And I was just in a monastery there, and he bent down and grabbed my feet and started bowing to them. I said, "What are you doing?" I didn't recognize him. He said, "You don't remember me, do you?" I said, "Of course not. Who are you?" And he said, "I was the one who first taught him meditation." And he valued that gift so much, he just wanted to pay extra respect. And I can understand that. So you can understand why the king, he had the Buddha as his teacher. Why you wouldn't want to express this emotional, powerful sense of gratitude. Just saying thank you is not enough. So anyway, then the Buddha asked the king, "Why do you enjoy coming to this monastery more than any other?" And that's where the king said, "Because when I walk into this monastery, all the monks are happy and smiling. It's like a photograph of what monasteries were like in the time of the Buddha. Because all the monks were happy and smiling. Because all the monks and nuns were happy and smiling." Okay, a few of you getting it, smiling. And the Buddha said, yes, that's what you can expect. When the monks are meditating properly and getting deep insights, the energy is coming up. And this is how it appeared in India 25 centuries ago. So why can this not appear in Sri Lanka in 2023 or 2,500 and, 67? 66. But anyway, if you want to follow and be good students of the Buddha, please meditate until you have an almost constant smile, enjoying the fruits of the Dhamma. So anyhow, there's something about that happiness which many people are afraid of. Sometimes they think that if you're smiling, you cannot be practicing. You haven't really understood dukkha. If you understand dukkha, you should be grimacing all the time. That is not logical. If you understand the path out of dukkha, that should make you happy. So anyway, that what happens when you are observing things like nimittas, and they come easily, and you're not afraid of them, and you've given up the celebrations, because this is not a personal attainment. It's a sign that things are disappearing. You're letting go of control. These are not personal things which you can give yourself a certificate and hang it on the wall of your hut. I've got first jhana confirmed by Ajahn Brahm. I will never ever do that. That is, people who give out certificates for anything in Buddhism, they're just, basically, I don't care what type of monk or nun they are just not true to the teachings of the Buddha. So anyhow, that when you don't take these as a personal attainment, not something which you do, but something which happens when you stop doing things, when you don't interfere with what is a natural process. The reason why so many people don't get enlightened, don't get into jhanas, because they keep on interfering. I'll give you the simile now, a visual simile. I've told you already, how do you keep the water perfectly still? This is one important thing also. If you think that meditation is about concentration, then you're lost. You'll never be able to concentrate. It's what you do. You have a limit to how much you can concentrate. And you cannot go past that limit. Samadhi means stillness, There's no limit to stillness. That's why stillness can go extremely deep. So the only way to keep the water still is to put it down. Many of you can do that. You've heard me many times, that's why you're here. And sometimes you manage to leave the water alone and it gets quite still. But then what many of you do, maybe you just start to experience some nimittas. Is that a nimitta? Oh no, not yet. Come on, when are you going to be still? Look, I've only got a few more days of this retreat left, come on. And it's strange, but many people interfere with the process just when it's really starting to happen. You've done everything correct, and a nimitta is about to arise or is starting to arise. Yes, come on, I should do this, I should do that. Please, keep everything very peaceful and still. You are the one who disturbs the process of deepening the nimittas and getting into the jhanas. Your main role of mindfulness is to try and keep you from interfering. Because I do travel a lot on aircraft to teach, sometimes on an aircraft I look at the in-flight magazine. And I do believe that this was on an Air Asia flight. So I looked at that magazine and there was an article there which I thought was very interesting and adaptable to giving talks about meditation. It was a pilot who worked for Air Asia describing what he thought would be the aircraft of the future. And he said in aircraft of the future of all airlines, big aircraft, small aircraft, in the cockpit up front, there will only be two beings allowed in that cockpit. The first person would be the pilot, the second being would be his dog. The only two beings allowed in the cockpit, the pilot and the dog. The job of the pilot, the only job of the pilot, would be to feed the dog. And the job of the dog would be to bite the pilot if he tried to touch anything. It would be totally automatic. And that was the safest way to have planes guided to their destination. They only needed a pilot up the front there to give the passengers a sense of security. And the dog was there to, again, make sure the pilot never touched anything. Only thing he did was feed the dog. And I thought, what a wonderful simile for meditation that would be. If I could put a little dog in your mind, and every time you started to interfere with the natural process of meditation, was to bite you, to stop you doing that again. Of course, that's only a metaphor, but I think it's an accurate metaphor. So when the nimitta starts to arise, we have this special test of being able to see something very powerful without interfering with it. To enjoy it, but not control it. Very much like seeing a sunset. Our monastery over in Australia is on the side of a hill facing west. And so we have some beautiful sunsets there. But if anyone goes to see the sunset and said, can you please be more red? Can the golds go a bit further, please? Can we please make it last a bit longer? It's very beautiful. Well, I haven't got much time this evening. I've got to give a talk somewhere. Can you please go quickly? You see how stupid that is, how mad that is? The sunset is a natural phenomena which a human being hasn't got any control over. It's just like nimittas. When you realize the only thing you can do with a nimitta is spoil it, delay it, destroy it, then you realize that your job is to be perfectly still. not to interfere, but to enjoy. And then the nimitta, if all the causes are correct, the nimitta gets very, very beautiful. The most beautiful thing you've ever seen in your life. And I think many of you can understand that. And that's why, because it's beautiful, we try to attach to it, control it, hold on to it. Or think that we can go deeper. No, that's good enough. And if you stay with this beautiful nimitta, isn't that enough for you? If you want more, it's wanting, which means you disturb the whole process. You've got to just watch, see what happens. And if it is a powerful nimitta, then you will feel yourself. This, when you experience this many times, this is how people describe it. Either just going right into that nimitta, or the nimitta just going all over you, you disappearing into it. I can't say much about personal experiences for those obvious reasons of the Pajitiyas, but it's very easy to talk about other people's experience. And there's one of these monks, which I know, or knew. I really don't mind saying his name now, because he's passed away. If I knew any one of you had a jhana experience, I would not let anybody know. And the reason is because that would make you a little bit famous. And then you would get hounded by people taking photographs of you when you walk back to your hut, or inviting you for all sorts of things, giving you too many things as gifts. You can understand why, but this particular monk was an Indonesian monk. And I met him a couple of times. But this monk, he decided, this was quite a few years ago, he decided to become like a rishi. He wasn't particularly a Buddhist. He didn't sort of ordain as an anagarika or as a novice. He just decided as a young man to go into the jungle, find a nice quiet place and meditate. But he had some incredibly good karma from his previous times. And this is how he said what happened. He closed his eyes. Many times he had meditated, but this particular time, he said with his eyes closed in the middle of the jungle, this big star came down. That's how he described it, beautiful star. And then how he said it was really quite strange. This is how he could express himself in English, which was not his first language. And then he said he married that star. Now, it doesn't mean like the normal sensual marriages. It means, as I interpret it, he united with that beautiful nimitta. And when he came out of the meditation, it was many days later. When you're in these deep meditations, you have no perception of time. And he knew it was many days later, because where he was sitting looked very different than what he remembered where he started sitting. He checked with the villagers. There had been a flood. This was in Java, in Indonesia. And obviously it rained a lot there. And he had worked out that he'd been underwater for many days. The flood was just so big that he'd been covered with a meter or two of water. Totally covered. And he could see that by the destruction of the forest and confirmed that with the villagers. And that was one of the first things which confirmed that this was one of the jhanas, a deep one. In those jhanas, you don't have to be afraid of anything. It's like you are invulnerable. If you want to know the Buddhist texts, which confirm that these two villagers were walking through the forest collecting mushrooms or something. They were Buddhist. And they saw this monk sitting in the forest. And he wasn't breathing. And they thought, the Venerable has died. And they were Buddhists. What would you do in the back if you walked through here and you saw there was a monk sitting so quietly you couldn't see him breathing, and think, oh my goodness, the Venerable has died, passed away. It would be wrong to just leave him alone here and let him get eaten by the jungle animals. So these villagers, they got some wood from the forest. They were in the forest, pretty easy. Made a pyre, a funeral pyre for this monk. Put him on top of that pyre. Did whatever chanting they could remember, which wasn't much. And they lit the pyre. And when the wood had taken the flame and was burning merrily, they realized the fire would do the rest of the work. They'd already spent a lot of time preparing the pyre, putting the monk on top and doing some chanting. They had other business to do. You know what it's like in the lay world, in the back over there? They didn't have all day to spend, cremating monks. So anyway, they left. The next morning, you can imagine how inspired and surprised they were when they saw this monk walking in their village for alms round. Not even his robes were burnt. Everything was intact. And the monk didn't have spare robes, he was a forest monk. And that was an example which the Buddha taught about what happens if you get into a jhana and you are flooded, and water all over your head, or there's a big bushfire. We have problems with bushfires in Australia. They can be very devastating. And sometimes when I tell the fire brigade that, don't have to worry about the monks, they just get into jhana and then the buildings may burn down, but the monks are okay. The fire brigade are not impressed because they don't know anything about the jhanas. But nevertheless, you're perfectly safe. So please do not be afraid of entering these states. Because one of the things which you have to abandon as you enter these states of deep meditation is one of those parts of the self which, because we don't understand it totally, we're afraid of letting go of it. And that is the cetana, the will. This is one of the things which you see in politics. People always want to vote. They want to have a choice. As a monk, you want to have a choice of where you live, what you do, what you eat, as best you possibly can. That sense of control and choice is conditioned into you to such an extent it goes well beyond what is for your welfare. We want to control our life. We want to control the places where we stay, what we eat, and especially in meditation, we want to control how we meditate and what to do. And to attain these jhanas, or to get into these jhanas, I shouldn't have said attainment, because attainment is the result of what you do. These are the results of what you don't do. You don't interfere. You have this beautiful trust in the teachings of the Buddha. And so you just let go. Let go of controlling. And just then, when you disappear enough, then those jhanas can happen. One other little piece of advice. The nimittas are very delightful. Obviously the jhanas are more delightful. I remember this one monk I'm very close to. When we get so close to the jhanas, you just have to let go of one little bit more thing, one little bit more of controlling, of doing, of maintaining your sense of will. And it's like you are standing in front of an open door. Where you are is pretty pleasant, the nimittas. But to get that further, to go through that door, you have to let go of all control. One of the most important parts of your illusion of a self. And the door is open. There's nothing stopping you except your own unwillingness to let go totally. But then you can see inside is so much more freedom, so much more delight. And sometimes I remember that person thinking, I can't do this, it's just too dangerous. But it's so beautiful in there. But I can't. But it's so lovely in there. But this is dangerous. Oh, what the heck, I'm going for it. Something like that. I mean, not in those words, because you can't speak such words, or even think such complicated sentences when you're at the door into jhanas. This is just a description of what it feels like. It's a joy which pulls many people in. Irresistible. So when one is entering that jhana, sometimes one comes out almost immediately, simply because one's degree of letting go was not strong enough. And I used a word for that, and I called them ping-pong jhanas. Ping pong, like a table tennis ball, ping-pong, in and then out again. Because you're too scared to stay in there. The confidence is not there. But after a while, don't worry, ping-pong jhanas are better than no jhanas at all. Then after a while, I say, I'm fed up with going in and going out, I'm just going to go in, see what happens. And of course, it's my job, and any other teacher's job, is to give you that confidence. You're safe. It can be done. Even for lay people. One of these examples, and I can't resist saying, was this person who came on one of my meditation retreats, and I describe him as dressed in traditional Australian uniform, or Australian dress. Thongs on his feet, shorts, and a dirty t-shirt. And because he wasn't wearing that much, you could see he was covered with so many tattoos. He did not look like the sort of person who was coming on a meditation retreat. In fact, he looked like one of the people who was a friend of one of the prisoners, because we had a prison about 6 kilometers up the road. And being a stupid monk, I said to him, "Sir, this is a retreat center. We're doing a retreat here. I think you must be looking for the prison, which is 6 miles up the road, 6 kilometers up the road." I judged him. You should never do that, but I make mistakes. He said, "No, I'm on the list to be here." And I checked, his name was there. And he was the most unlikely of persons to join the retreat. And he was the star meditator of that retreat. Sometimes you listen to people and they describe what their meditation is. And I know all the tricks. I know what these things are. And so when he finished his description, you've just had a jhana. He really was one, no doubt about that at all. And he was the person I least expected to get deep meditation. But you may have heard me tell about that man, and I never saw him again. Only recently, a few months ago, someone met him over in Sydney. He just moved to the eastern states. And he still says that experience, that changed his whole life. It was so powerful. And that you can't even get over it years afterwards, just how powerful and blissful that was. And again I think, well, great. There was another experience of one of the disciples, a lay woman, And she was highly intelligent, very good Buddhist, brilliant at work. And she was trying to get into these jhanas, but was failing. And I remember this retreat I was teaching over in Thailand. And poor thing put lots and lots of effort into her meditation. Got nowhere. But then, her taxi taking her to the airport to go home was not going to arrive for another hour. So what could she do? She said she went back into the meditation hall to kill time. You know that saying, to kill time, not to try and do anything or get anywhere, just nothing else to do. I remember just before her taxi came, she came to see me. I think I was waiting for my lift to the airport. And I was, I think, drinking some orange juice or something. It was a hot day. And she came on the ground, kneeling. She's a layperson, with her hands up. Ajahn Brahm. This, I'm trying to imitate this, I can't do it justice. Ajahn Brahm. Oh, Ajahn Brahm. Lost. Oh. She had her first experience of jhana. She never expected it. She never tried. She was just killing time. And all that, she was like the donkey who had stopped chasing the carrot, and to her complete surprise, the carrot came right into her mouth. But this, the afterglow of the deep meditation, so much bliss, so much energy. It was like, the only thing I can describe it as a young girl falling in love for the first time. Oh, oh, oh. But not with a person, just with meditation. And of course that changed her life too. She's now a bhikkhuni at Dhammasara. These are what happens. So anyway, you allow yourself to get pulled in. And when you're in there, remember your sense of doing, the sense of being in control of what you're going to do or think or what you're going to move next is gone. That's why many people feel it's a place where you don't exist. Because imagine that I took away your will, your ability to choose. And I would feel that you're not like your normal self. It's also why I say those are the two last places where your sense of atta, self, exists. In the doer and in the knower. The knowing is still very much alive. You can experience what's happening. You can't do anything about it. That is taken away from you. So this is one of the reasons why people feel it's a sense of their self doesn't exist there. It's very blissful. It's one of the reasons why when you come out of that state, you can't forget it. It's just too powerful. But then, and it's an obvious, I can't see how anybody would not do this. Now you ask yourself, what on earth was that? By far the biggest amount of bliss you've experienced in your life, and it had this sense of you weren't there. The sense of doing had gone. And that's one of the reasons why, if, for example, a Christian manages to fluke one of these jhanas, then they come out afterwards, what is the experience? They say, I wasn't there. It was very highly blissful, incredible joy. You know what they call that in Christian spirituality? Union with God. And you kind of can't convince them of anything else. And if that was the case, say Venerable Dhammata was not a Buddhist but a Christian, And if you got a jhana, they would name a school after you. St. Dhamma School. But usually what happens with Buddhists, you've got much better information. You've heard the Dhamma. You know this is not a union with God. This nimitta is your mind, your citta, purified. And the first jhana which you have, you actually can perceive when you come out afterwards. What I said, I don't know a better word to describe it, the wobble. Vitakka vichara. Vitakka is the mind going onto the object. Vitakka means different things in different contexts, as you all know. But in the sense of meditation, it can never and does not mean thought. That is far too coarse for these refined states of awareness called jhanas. This is the mind going onto the object. Vichara is like holding onto it. Your confidence, it's not something you can do, it's just your natural tendency. The confidence is not strong enough just to leave it alone and let it stay. And because of holding on a little bit too tight, you recede away again. But because the bliss is so strong, straight back onto it again. What I call the wobble. As the confidence increases, then you find that you don't move away from that nimitta at all. Not so nimitta, for that bliss. You stay there, even though your vichara is still there. It's weakened. Which, as any of you scholars know, that's the 1.5 jhanas. Have you ever heard describe the 5 jhanas, not just the 4th? The one I've just been saying is avitaka savichara, with still the holding on. Really, when the Buddha taught, that's really so close to the 2nd jhana, I think that's why it's usually put with the 2nd jhana. You're with this bliss. It doesn't move. Because it doesn't move, it's like a diamond samadhi, unmovable, unbreakable. And you're there for long periods of time. You cannot choose, I'm going to come out now. It's like you're stuck in there, pleasantly stuck. There's no little key. There's no little computer mouse to press. There's no button to press to get out. You're very happy in there, but there's no way of coming out for a while. And that is one of the reasons why that sometimes, I don't know if you've seen this, sometimes some monks or nuns can get into these states of meditation for days. There was this, I might go over time a bit, sorry. There was this Vietnamese Theravada monk who visited Sydney. And he was giving a 9-day meditation retreat. And started off, when everybody had checked in and got their accommodation, they would have a briefing session of the rules of the retreat. And then they would do a half-an-hour meditation, and then he would give the introductory talk. So he sat down there for that half-an-hour meditation to begin with, and when the half-an-hour was up, he never opened his eyes. He just carried on meditating. And when the hour had gone past where he was supposed to be giving a talk, everybody wondered what the heck was going on. Some of them stayed a bit longer and meditated some more, but then eventually they went to bed. They got up in the morning, there was no morning chanting, he was still meditating there. There was no morning talk, there was no instructions, because he meditated there for 8 days. Not drinking, not eating, not going to the toilet, just sitting there perfectly still. I know that usually they say 7 days for getting into these deep meditation, but he was there for 8 days. People saw it. And as soon as he came out of that 8-day meditation without moving or eating or drinking, he said, sorry, so I apologize. I should have been giving you some talks, but I got into a deep meditation, and now it's over. You know what the lay people said? They said, no, sadhu, sadhu, thank you. To be able to be inspired and see these are not just words, but these are truths which we witness with our own eyes. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Their practice was more important than the theories. So anyway, that's what happens. And the way to overcome that, because sometimes you do have duties to perform. You promise to give talks, and it feels wrong. If you get into a deep meditation, you can't do that. So what you do, you make these adhisthanas. When you start meditating, if you know that the meditation is likely to get into one of these jhanas, you tell yourself, I have to come out at, 8:30? I must come out at 8:30. I must come out at 8:30. That's all you need to do. You tell yourself clearly the time that you must exit. And then what happens? The jhana is just rolling along, enjoying yourself, not thinking about anything. And then you come out. 1 minute either side of 8:30. So if any of you start to get some deep meditation, please remember the adhisthana. Tell yourself when you're going to come out. Otherwise you create a lot of difficulty for the other monks and nuns you live with. And within those states of jhana, again, once that confidence, that letting go gets deeper, the first jhana turns into the second jhana. The longer you stay in that second jhana, it's quite obvious the stillness there will make something vanish. And what vanishes, is the piti, a coarser form of happiness. When you say a coarser form of happiness, it's sometimes, this is bliss anyway. This is good enough. It's more than most people experience in their whole lives. And now it vanishes. And a finer type of bliss is there, the sukha of the third jhana. And you stay with that for long enough, that will vanish too. And then you will have, what they call equanimity. Even the word equanimity, upekkha, that's what equanimity kind of means. But it doesn't mention the fact that this is also very blissful. Why the Buddha called it upekkha sukha, the happiness of equanimity. That's why sometimes in English try and say contentment, but contentment is usually used for santuti. This is a deep sense of blissful peace. And that, often in the fourth jhana, it does look like you're not breathing. You're so still. The body doesn't need any breath. That's why, be careful if you get into a fourth jhana a lot, please let your friends know. Otherwise they'll take you to the crematorium. You won't get burned, but it is still, maybe you'll kill other people when you come out and they think, my goodness, I thought you were dead. The difference, which you should know, and it's true, is that the difference between being dead and being in, say, a fourth jhana, in the jhanas, the body is always warm. You may not be breathing, there may not be any discernible heartbeat, or even any brain activity, even a CT scan of your brain, nothing happening there. but the body remains warm. Please know that if you're got people who can meditate very deeply, because you check their body temperature. If they're still warm, leave them alone. They'll come out in their time. They're not dead yet. Now that's what those jhanas are like. While you're in them, you are still very mindful, super mindful. The purity of mindfulness reaches its peak in the fourth jhana. You're not in a trance. You're fully aware, more mindful than you've ever been before. And then that mindfulness is very still. You cannot move it this way and that way to understand exactly what's happening. But you remember that very easily. And that's why that most people start to understand exactly where they were, what it was and why it was when they come out of the meditation. Wow, that was amazing. As I said, I think yesterday, when you come out, don't be so concerned about what was there, what was remaining. See if you can explore what was missing, what wasn't there. And that is where you will get some of the greatest insights into understanding what anatta is, understanding what dukkha is. Why is it so blissful? Because so much suffering had disappeared. Not every part of suffering, but a huge amount. And of course, that'll be just like you're so light. You're not weighed down by suffering. And just anicca, and the fact that things which were there for such a long time, that you took them for granted, like the air which you're breathing right now, you don't really know what it is because it's always there. But if somehow or other you could remove all the air from this marquee, this tent, then you would know what air was. So this is actually where you get some powerful deep insights. And of course, I am very conscious of the hard-working Dhamma there. So I'm going to finish now. And I think you can probably understand where this afternoon's talk is going to go, about the insights which arise as a result of those experiences, how they arise, and what happens when they arise. Thank you for listening. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.